The Los Angeles Chargers went from going 5-12 in their last season with Brandon Staley, where he was fired before the season ended, and they ended up going 11-6 in their first year with Coach Harbaugh, and they made the NFL playoffs. Unfortunately, they lost to the Houston Texans in the first round. This video is more so of a recap of what happened in the regular season and also what they should do in this offseason to help out Justin Herbert. And basically, can they win a playoff game with Justin Herbert in the foreseeable future? But we have to start off with what happened last offseason. They went out there, they hired Jim Harbaugh to be their new head coach. And everywhere he has been, he has turned programs and teams around. At Stanford, they were one of the best teams in college football. Over with the San Francisco 49ers, they made the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, they lost to the Baltimore Ravens, but he went to the Super Bowl and he made a deep playoff run with Colin Kaepernick at the quarterback position. He went over to Michigan. He won a national championship in his last season with Michigan. I do believe the Los Angeles Chargers are going to be a perennial contender in the AFC long term, but they still have a lot of problems to work out. And I love Jim Harbaugh as a head coach. You have Jesse Minter, who's already one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. You look at that defense with Brandon Staley. They're in the bottom of the league in terms of rushing and passing defense. You look at them this year, they were a top unit against the pass and against the run at certain points in times. They did tail off a little bit due to injuries, but I look at Jesse Minter. He's a very good in-game adjuster. And when Coach Harbaugh went down with a medical issue, he was a coach that stepped in to be the interim head coach at that time for the game. Coach Harbaugh was able to come back and finish out the game. But when you look at Jesse Minter, I think that he has all the tools to one day be a head coach in this league. And you have Greg Roman. I don't think that Greg Roman will ever be a head coach on this level. As an offensive coordinator, he is limited because of the lack of ability to go out there and give his quarterbacks a true passing concept. In terms of being creative with those passing concepts, we saw this with Lamar Jackson. We saw this with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick. But Greg Roman did help coach up Lamar Jackson into getting his first MVP. And he was a part of that coaching staff when they went to the Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick. I'm not saying that he's a terrible offensive coordinator. But if you want to see an offense go out there and lead the league in passing offense or be a top 5 to top 10 unit, I don't think that's going to happen with Greg Roman because they love to run the football. And that's why Coach Harbaugh has hired him to be the offensive coordinator with the Chargers. And if you ever see yourself getting frustrated with the Chargers not passing the football enough, trust me, I understand it. But I want you guys to realize this. They've tried that with Justin Herbert. Remember when they had those terrible offensive coordinators earlier in his career? And they were trying to throw the football with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams on the field. He was able to go out there and have great numbers, but it did not translate over to wins. At the end of the day, in order to make deep playoff runs, you have to run the football, get to the quarterback, take care of your quarterback, and occasionally take those deep shots down the field. You already have the quarterback in Justin Herbert. I think that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL to have. The playoff record is not the best, but I do believe with extra help, he can be in the conversation in terms of going out there and having a good playoff record long term. And it brings it over to the roster that they have. This was a rebuilding type of year for the Chargers on the offensive end because they went out there and they traded Keenan Allen to the Chicago Bears. They wanted him to take a pay cut. He said, hell no. I don't blame him. He wanted to make all this money. He just had a great season the season before. But Coach Harbaugh is looking at it from this standpoint. We didn't give you this contract. We're in cap hell right now. We need you to restructure that deal. He said no. They traded him to the Chicago Bears. Mike Williams, they cut him because he was coming off a torn ACL injury. And let's be real about something here. Mike Williams is not even close to being the same wide receiver he was 2 to 3 years ago. We saw that on the Steelers and we saw that with the New York Jets. He is still able to go out there and have big time moments, but he's not that consistent deep threat anymore. And he is a step slower than he used to be. So your top wide receivers were a rookie and Ladd McConkey at the time, who you selected in the second round. A lot of people came out and they said what the Chargers are doing. What's wrong with the Chargers right now? They passed up on Malik Neighbors. They went with Joe Alt. They need wide receiving help because just a year before you selected Quentin Johnston. He had a terrible rookie season with Brandon Staley. He had a lot of drops on the year and he cost the Chargers some football games, especially that game against the Green Bay Packers. So you're depending on a rookie and Ladd McConkey. You're depending on Quentin Johnston. The wide receiving core was a major issue all season long until Ladd McConkey started to step up. Ladd McConkey this year was phenomenal. He was their best wide receiver, and right now he is their number one wide receiver. He is a definition of a gym rat. He's not the biggest guy on the field. He's only 185 pounds, and he's 6 foot tall. But he's going to be able to go out there and win those tough assignments in the interior of the defense. In terms of going across the middle of the field on those quick out routes and even going deep down the field in certain situations. We saw him do this against the Kansas City Chiefs, against the Cincinnati Bengals, and against the New Orleans Saints. So when I look at it from that standpoint, Ladd McConkey is a very good wide receiver. And that's a great wide receiver to build this core around. 82 catches, 1,149 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns. And he was not just a dink and dunk wide receiver. He averaged 14 yards a catch. Quentin Johnston, on the other hand, even though he did have a solid year for his standards, 52 catches, 711 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. He averaged 13 yards a catch. Quentin Johnston right now is not a reliable number 2 wide receiver, even though he did put up solid numbers. We have to realize something. This kid was selected in the first round over Zay Flowers. That's not on Coach Harbaugh. That's not on this administration. That happened with Brandon Staley and that former general manager. I don't know why they selected him over Zay Flowers. It didn't make sense then, and it doesn't make any sense now. You already had 2 wide receivers that are big body wide receivers in Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. And I do understand it from this standpoint. You want to bring in another big body wide receiver just in case one of those guys go down. But Zay Flowers could have given you something different at the time. But you can't cry over something that happened in the past. You can only go out there and impact your future and try to control your future. Quentin Johnston will be a very good number 3 wide receiver. They need to bring in another guy. The Chargers are still facing a lot of salary cap problems right now. And I'll talk about that when I get into the defense of why some of those defensive pieces may not be on this roster long term. But when I look at the wide receiving core, you could draft a wide receiver in the first round. You could draft a guy in the second round. You hit on Ladd McConkey in the second round. Passing on Malik Neighbors is going to work out long term because Ladd McConkey is phenomenal. And Joe Alt, Coach Harbaugh sees him as an offensive weapon. He came out and he said this. So you have 2 bookend tackles in Rashawn Slater, also in Joe Alt. The problem is this. Justin Herbert was sacked 41 times. That's the 7th most in the NFL for a quarterback. And he missed half a game against the Steelers in that matchup because he was dealing with an ankle injury that he suffered the week before against the Carolina Panthers. It's not because Joe Alt was a bust. He looked tremendous. He was one of the best rookie tackles that you can have. Rashawn Slater, when he's fully healthy, he's a beast. Majority of the pressure came from the interior of the offensive line. I love Bradley as a person because what he did for Justin Herbert in that Saints game, it was such a dirty play by the Saints defender. He's rolling the ankle of Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert just gets up. You look at Bradley, he's on top of him. He's basically pushing him down. And he's saying, hey, don't do that to my quarterback. You need that in a player. But at the same time, you need him to be a better offensive lineman. You don't need him to just go out there and basically just be an enforcer the entire time. The play has to match the intensity. And right now, the play is not matching that. They need to bring in a brand new center, a brand new left guard, and a brand new right guard also. The entire interior of this offensive line, they need a makeover. And I know that's the one thing that Coach Harbaugh is going to harp on. And I know this because look at what he did with Michigan. Even though that's college, he addressed the offensive line. He addressed the defensive line. Back with the San Francisco 49ers, he passed up on skill position players to just put more money in the offensive line. This is going to be an offensive line driven team moving forward. And you know for a fact that Coach Harbaugh, he hated to see Justin Herbert go down that many times. And we've seen Justin Herbert in the past not have enough time in the pocket. He'll play through injuries. He's Superman in that regard. But you need to give him more time in the interior. So address the interior of this offensive line more so than the wide receiving position. Because you could find wide receivers in the NFL draft. And I'm also down on the wide receivers in free agency. T. Higgins is phenomenal, but I doubt that he's going to go to another team because the Cincinnati Bengals, more than likely, they're going to franchise tag him. They may sign him to a 3 or 4 year deal. Stephon Diggs, he's a free agent. He's coming off a torn ACL with the Houston Texans. And let's not act like Stephon Diggs had a great year this year with the Houston Texans before he went down. Very good in the red zone situations. Don't get me wrong. But they need an explosive wide receiver on the outside that can win those one-on-one opportunities. I look at Stephon Diggs in certain matchups this year, he struggled against press coverage. Not saying that he can't go out there and turn everything around. He can, but you're going to pay an aging wide receiver that has been a diva in the past. and he's coming off a major injury to his knee. I don't think that's worth it for the Chargers unless it's a 1-year deal worth up to $10 million. You look at Keenan Allen. He's a free agent with the Chicago Bears. He said that he's open to going to the Rams, the Chargers, or going back to the Bears. He's either going to go back to the Chargers or he's going to stay with the Bears. I think it'll be a nice reunion for the Chargers, but this is the problem I have with Keenan Allen. He can't stay healthy for a full season, and he is slower now than he was years before, which is going to happen because he's an older wide receiver. They may bring him back, but even if you do, bring in another wide receiver in the NFL draft to figure things out. You have Chris Godwin. I doubt if he leaves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He seems like he's going to be a lifer. He's close friends with Baker Mayfield. He's close friends with Mike Evans. And his wife, she loves the Tampa Bay area. And he's coming off a major injury also to his ankle that he suffered against the Baltimore Ravens Monday Night Football game. You want to pump a lot of money into him? I think that he's going to stay with the Buccaneers. Brandon Cooks, at this stage of his career, dealing with a lot of injuries. He's not the same guy that he once was. He's a solid deep threat. He's not going to be that Brandon Cooks that you saw with the Patriots or that you saw with the New Orleans Saints. Then you have Deontay Johnson. I would love to see Deontay Johnson with the Chargers. The problem is this with Deontay Johnson. His attitude is terrible. He drops a lot of passes, and it's just not worth his attitude. This man got kicked off the team with the Houston Texans because he was complaining that he did not get the football that much in the locker room. And they just beat the Los Angeles Chargers in the playoffs. And you're complaining about not getting the football enough. And he refused to check in. He refused to check into a game with the Baltimore Ravens. And that's the brother of Coach Harbaugh. So I doubt that the Chargers would go out there and bring him in. He just has a bad reputation right now. So you're limited at the wide receiving position. You can go back with Mike Williams. You can look at Robert Woods. You have Marquise Brown, Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton may be an interesting wide receiver that you could possibly bring in, but you need to bring in a guy that can take the top off the defense, that can win one-on-one opportunities, and that can just catch the football in crucial situations. It was so many times this year when Ladd McConkey was fully healthy because he did miss some time dealing with some injuries to where guys just couldn't get open. And Justin Herbert, he's holding on to the football for a very long time. And the fact that the interior with this offensive line was so weak, you have him just getting pressure a lot. He's just taking a lot of unnecessary risks. That's why against the Carolina Panthers, he got hit with that ankle injury because he was trying to make something out of nothing. You already know that Justin Herbert, he doesn't like to throw the football away. He loves to play hero football. Go out there and get some wide receiving help and continue to build up this offensive line. The run game this year, it was inconsistent at times. Even though J.K. Dobbins did have a solid year, 905 rushing yards on the year, 9 rushing touchdowns. He averaged 4.6 yards a carry. They gave their running backs a lot of opportunities, but they would rip off a big run at least once or twice a game. So they basically skewed the numbers with their running backs. Very good production, by the way, by J.K. Dobbins. Has struggled to stay healthy. He did miss time this previous season, but he looked very good in the field when he was fully healthy. This is a man in the past that suffered so many injuries with the Ravens. It was a comeback story. I think that you can bring him back for sure. And they were giving him the football 20 to 25 times a game. Bring in another running back to take the load off of J.K. Dobbins. You had Gus Edwards, but Gus Edwards this year, something was off with him. He was dealing with injuries. He wasn't that available on the field. You bring in someone like a Najee Harris to play alongside J.K. Dobbins. I think that's the perfect fit. And it depends on what Najee Harris wants to do in free agency. He could go back to the Steelers and their organization, but I think him being alongside J.K. Dobbins, I think that's the right direction to go into with the Chargers. And you build that ground attack. You run that football. You let Najee Harris be that power back. You bring in J.K. Dobbins. He has that explosive ability to bounce it to the outside for a 50 or a 60-yard gain. I think that's the way to go on the ground. But regardless, bring in another running back to help out J.K. Dobbins and keep him around. And another reason why I love the Najee Harris pickup so much, he's a healthy running back. And the Steelers, they give him the football a lot. And I mean a lot. So he can be that bell cow running back while J.K. Dobbins is out recovering from his injuries, or he can just come in and give J.K. Dobbins a breather. And you can split carries with both running backs, similar to what the Steelers did with Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. So offensive side of the ball, wide receiver, adding in another running back, interior offensive line, and possibly another tight end also. Will Dissly is known for being a blocking tight end. This is the most receiving yards that he's ever had in his career was this year. When I look at Will Dissly, He only averaged 9.6 yards a catch. He is what he is. You can bring in another receiving threat to play alongside him. Blocking wise, he's phenomenal. But if you want to go out there and run some play action bootleg packages, you're going to have to bring in a better receiving tight end if you want to go out there and run a 2 tight end set, something Greg Roman has done in the past with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, when I look at this defense, the cap is still a problem with the Chargers. And I look at Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa has not been able to stay healthy with the Chargers, to say the least. Joey Bosa has missed a lot of time in the past. He just went out there and he restructured his deal this previous offseason. He only had 5 sacks this year, 2 forced fumbles. He's still a very good pass rusher, but his play has tailed off a lot due to those injuries. I can see him playing with the San Francisco 49ers to just say that he played with his brother at the NFL level. I don't think that you have to go out there and pay him a lot of money. I think that you'll be more in tune of just letting him go. If he wants to come back on a 2 or 3 year deal that's very team friendly, you keep him around. But you have Thule, who went out there this year, 8.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. You have Khalil Mack. I would prioritize him over Joey Bosa for the simple fact that he's been healthier. 6 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and you had Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree had 6 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 interception. So you have 4 pass rushers in a rotation that could get to the quarterback on a consistent basis. I think that's the way to go for the Los Angeles Chargers long term. Having a plethora of pass rushers that can go out there, give each other breathers, and just get to the quarterback on a consistent basis. I look at Poona Ford. I like him a lot. He's a very good run stopper. Had 3 sacks on the year, 1 interception. I think that he's good enough to keep around in the interior of the defensive line. Now look at the linebackers. You're solid there. Denzel Perryman is a solid rotational linebacker to have. When I look at the defense with the Chargers, it was basically a college defense. What Jesse Minter did this year, he would put 3 safeties on the field. Now that's a huge reason why their defense took a step back when those safeties started to go down. When you have 3 safeties on the field, you have a light box, but you have a guy in Derwin James who was essentially just an extra linebacker playing safety. Derwin James is a very versatile player. The interception numbers may not be there, but he was played in a better role this season than he ever was underneath Brandon Staley. He's a rover, and a rover is basically a guy that can move around the field. You can put him as cover safety. He's more so an in-box safety. You can put him on tight ends and short yardage situations. You're not going to put him on a guy like Travis Kelce in his prime like Brandon Staley did and have him cover him the entire game, especially in a game-winning drive situation. When I look at Jesse Minter, he was able to move him around, bring him off the edge in blitzes, use him with covering running backs out the backfield, covering tight ends across the middle of the field. He's a versatile safety to have. And as long as you have him, you're going to be very good in your secondary. But I like the safeties that they have besides Derwin James. Gilman was very good this year. Gilman went out there and had a very impressive season. And then you also had to bring in Marcus May. Marcus May is just a veteran safety to have around. The only reason that you brought him in was because of the injuries that you suffered throughout the season. Elijah Molden, 3 interceptions, 7 pass deflections, 43 solo tackles on the year. He's more so that ball hawk, playmaking type of safety that you're going to be looking at. When I look at their cornerbacks are solid. They won a game this year without scoring an offensive touchdown against the Atlanta Falcons. And majority of their players in the secondary, they were hurt. So that comes down to Jesse Minter. So your secondary, you have a lot of young players. Bring back Christian Fulton. Even though he was up and down this year, I think that he's a solid cornerback to have. You're going to be okay in that secondary. I like the pass rushers. You could bring back Joey Bosa, or you could let him go. And you could bring in another pass rusher via the draft or a cheaper option in free agency, like how you did with Bud Dupree. But I look at this defense, it's because the adjustments that Jesse Minter was able to make, and his scheme is one of the best schemes to run in today's NFL. When I look at Brandon Staley, I was so frustrated with Brandon Staley. If you listen to this channel over the last 2 to 3 years, you guys know that I hated Brandon Staley as a head coach. He relied so much on talent instead of going out there and running an actual scheme. When I look at Jesse Minter, this is what elite coaching and what real coaching looks like. Even when you're down with your top 3 cornerbacks, you still win a game against the Atlanta Falcons. Granted, Kirk Cousins was terrible in that matchup, but you won that game because your defense allowed little to nothing to happen with the opposing offense. And all of that was on Jesse Minter and his watch. When I look at Brandon Staley, you know the amount of times this defense was getting ran through and the amount of times that Travis Kelce was just eating up this defense over and over again. He put up career high numbers against this defense with Brandon Staley. Against Jesse Minter, not so much. And I'm going to also say this. They swept the Denver Broncos this season. Doesn't mean they're going to do that next season. This is still one of the toughest divisions in the NFL because they have Patrick Mahomes in here with the Kansas City Chiefs. But over the last 2 to 3 years, when Justin Herbert has been fully healthy, they've just been a couple of plays away from defeating the Kansas City Chiefs. They had the Chiefs down 10-0 in a matchup earlier in the year, and they lost that game. They were without their 2 starting tackles, and Justin Herbert was dealing with an ankle injury. And then they lost against the Chiefs again by a walk-off field goal with the Kansas City Chiefs. They just have to button up some of those plays. They're still learning how to win at the next level. And when I look at Justin Herbert and his numbers this year, Justin Herbert, 23 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Those are low numbers for a quarterback like Justin Herbert. We're used to Justin Herbert going out there and having 38 passing touchdowns to 15 interceptions like how he had in 2021. But like I mentioned before, they're flipping the offense around. They want him to still go out there and throw the football around, but they want to run the football just a little bit more. They want to run the football as much as possible. Those 3 interceptions were a career low. That's great. He threw 4 interceptions against the Houston Texans. I really did not get deep into this game. I was told that I was not being tough enough on Justin Herbert like how I've been tough on Jordan Love and other quarterbacks in the past. For one, this was a rebuilding offense, like I mentioned before. And I remember what I said in that video after that game against the Houston Texans. I said that the future is bright with the Chargers, but also this. Justin Herbert does have to play better in the playoffs. He does have to play better in big moments against Patrick Mahomes. We need to see those signature wins. He is a top 5 talented quarterback, but he's not a top 5 quarterback right now. I'm going to say that again. With the talent that he has, he's top 5 talented. As an actual quarterback, not just yet. He's easily a top 10 quarterback in my opinion. You guys may disagree with that. But when I look at Justin Herbert, the resume has to be better. It is a team game. But that loss against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he does deserve some blame. But majority of that blame should have went to Brandon Staley and Coach Lombardi, the terrible offensive coordinator. Those 4 interceptions, not every interception was on Justin Herbert. One of the interceptions bounced off the tight end's hands, and it went for an interception. Ladd McConkey was the only wide receiver that was able to get open. That defense dogged out Justin Herbert and that offense, and Greg Roman was out-coached. But there's only so much you can do when the interior of your offensive line is getting beat to hell, and when you only have one consistent wide receiver that can get open. That's why you have to address all those problems this year in free agency and in the entire offseason. Figure things out around Justin Herbert, and I do believe that he can win some playoff games and potentially win a Super Bowl long-term with the Chargers. I'm not saying next year you go out there, you bring in offensive linemen, you bring in a wide receiver, the next thing you know, you're going to be like the Philadelphia Eagles. That's not how the NFL works. You should have to figure things out, bring in the right pieces around Justin Herbert, and let Coach Harbaugh fully take over this organization. But in year 1, to go 11-6 from 5-12, that was great. And like I mentioned before, they made the playoffs with Brandon Staley. That was based off of talent alone that they had. But let me know in the comment section below, what should the Los Angeles Chargers do this offseason? And do you disagree with me with saying that Justin Herbert is not a top 5 quarterback in the NFL just yet? If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, I want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless. Peace.